The night was calm, but the city lights made the streets glow like gold. An elderly black man walked slowly down the sidewalk, his polished shoes tapping softly against the pavement. He wore a dark coat, a little old but clean, and a simple hat that covered his gray hair. In his hand he carried nothing but a folded newspaper and a small leather wallet. He looked tired, as if he had walked a long way. But his steps were steady, his posture tall. Every now and then, he looked up at the glowing signs of the tall buildings around him. Most people rushing past didn't notice him. Those who did gave him a quick glance, then looked away. To them, he was just another old man walking alone on a cold evening. At the end of the street stood a restaurant that looked like a palace. Its windows glowed with warm light, and the golden letters above the entrance read, "La Royale, Fine Dining." The entrance was decorated with 2 tall plants in golden pots, and a long red carpet stretched to the door. Luxury cars pulled up one by one. Men in suits and women in glittering dresses stepped out, greeted by smiling doormen. Inside, faint jazz music drifted out every time the door opened, along with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. The old man stopped at the bottom of the red carpet. He looked up at the glowing sign, then at the doorman. One of them, a young man with slick hair, noticed him and frowned slightly. The doorman's eyes traveled from the old man's coat to his worn shoes. His polite smile faded for a second, then returned, but stiff and forced. The old man didn't seem to notice. He simply adjusted his hat, straightened his coat, and began walking up the red carpet, step by step. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was like another world. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, filling the room with soft golden light. White tablecloths covered every table, each one decorated with fresh flowers. The waiters moved like dancers, carrying trays of wine glasses and steaming plates. Soft music played from a live band in the corner, and the guests laughed and chatted in calm voices, as if nothing bad could ever happen in this place. But when the glass doors opened, and the elderly black man stepped inside, the air seemed to change. The music didn't stop, but the conversations did. For a few seconds, almost everyone turned their heads to look at him. Their eyes scanned his coat, his shoes, his hat. He wasn't dressed poorly, but compared to the shining suits and sparkling gowns around him, he stood out. He didn't look like he belonged, at least not to them. At the reception desk, a young waiter stood with a tablet in his hand. His uniform was crisp, his body perfectly straight. When he saw the old man, he plastered on a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. The old man approached calmly, his expression unreadable. Before the man could say anything, the waiter spoke first, his voice polite but sharp. "Good evening, sir. You sure you're in the right place?" The words were soft, but they carried a weight. Nearby, a few guests heard him and chuckled. Under their breath, the old man didn't flinch. He looked at the waiter and spoke in a calm, deep voice. "Yes, I have a reservation." The waiter blinked, as if surprised. "I see," he said quickly, his fake smile growing wider. "May I ask the name?" The old man took out a small slip of paper from his coat pocket. He unfolded it slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, and handed it to the waiter. The waiter took it, his fingers brushing against the paper, and glanced at the name written there. His brows lifted slightly. For just a moment, his eyes flickered with something confusion, maybe even recognition. But then his smirk returned. He turned the paper over as if checking for something hidden, then looked back at the man. "I'll have to confirm this," the waiter said, stepping aside to check his tablet. He tapped on the screen, scrolling, pretending to search.
Meanwhile,
More guests began to whisper. Some of them sipped their wine, pretending not to stare, but they were watching closely. "Who is he?" a man whispered to his wife at the nearest. "Table? No idea," she murmured, her eyes lingering on the old man's coat. "Maybe he's lost. He doesn't look like he can afford this place." The old man heard them, didn't turn his head, didn't respond. He simply stood with his hands resting on the counter, waiting patiently. His face stayed calm, but his dark eyes scanned the room, sharp and observant. Finally, the waiter looked up from his tablet, his smile now more like a smirk. "I'm sorry, sir," he said. I don't see your name on the list.
I will not tell you shit.
You didn't make a reservation at a different restaurant? More laughter came from a table behind the old man. A younger guest, wearing a flashy watch, leaned over to his friend and muttered, "Maybe he thought this was a diner or something." They both chuckled, shaking their heads. The old man turned his gaze toward them for a moment. Not a glare, just a slow, calm look. The two men immediately stopped laughing and looked away. Then the old man looked back at the waiter. His voice was steady, quiet, but carried through the room. "I am in the right place," he said, "and I suggest you check again." The way he said it made the waiter pause for a second. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. But there was something in the tone, something that made the young waiter's hand tremble slightly as he held the tablet. Before the waiter could respond, another voice joined the scene. It came from the side, calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" The restaurant manager had arrived. He was a tall man in a black suit, his tie sharp, his hair perfectly slicked back, walked over quickly, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The guests turned to watch. This was becoming entertainment. The waiter turned to the manager immediately. "Ah, Mr. Collins, this gentleman is trying to dine with us, but I don't see his reservation anywhere." The words were polite, but his tone carried the same message. He doesn't belong here. The manager's eyes swept over the old man. From his coat to his shoes, he gave a thin smile. "I'm afraid this is a private establishment, sir," the manager said smoothly. "We only serve members and confirmed reservations. Perhaps there's been some confusion. I can direct you to a restaurant nearby that might suit your needs better." There it was again, polite words, but the meaning was clear. The old man stood quietly, letting the silence hang for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice even lower now, but somehow stronger. "Are you certain?" The way he said it made both the waiter and the manager pause. There was something in his tone, not anger, not arrogance, but confidence. It felt heavy. The guests around them leaned closer, pretending to sip their drinks, but they were all listening. Whispers spread like a breeze across the tables. "Who is he?" Someone murmured. "Maybe he's important," another whispered. "Doesn't look like it," a third replied, smirking. But even those who mocked him felt something shift in the air. The old man didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He just waited. And as he waited, the restaurant seemed to grow quieter, as if everyone knew something was about to happen, and it would. Because none of them, not the waiter, not the manager, not even the curious diners, had any idea who the man really was. But they were about to find out. The golden light of the chandeliers shimmered across the polished marble floor. But the air inside Le Royal no longer felt warm, felt heavy. Every pair of eyes seemed to watch the elderly black man as he stood at the reception desk, waiting for the manager's answer. The restaurant wasn't loud anymore. The jazz music still played in the background, but the soft notes of the piano felt distant. The laughter that had filled the dining hall moments ago had faded to quiet murmurs. People didn't laugh now, they whispered, at a corner table near the window. A group of wealthy guests leaned closer together, speaking in low voices. "Who is that old man?" one woman asked, her voice sharp, her diamond earrings glittering as she moved her head. "Probably just wandered in," a man in a tuxedo said, smirking as he sipped his wine. "Look at his coat. It's so plain." Another woman giggled softly. "Do you think he even knows how expensive this place is?" "They should just tell him to leave." At another table, two young men in business suits whispered to each other. "Maybe he's some retired worker, lost his way. Can't afford a place like this." The other one chuckled under his breath. "Maybe he thought it was a buffet." Their laughter was soft, but not soft enough. The old man heard every word. He didn't turn his head. He didn't frown. He just stood there, his hands folded in front of him, his dark eyes fixed on the manager. But those who looked closely could see something in his expression, a calm so deep. It almost felt unnatural. The manager, Mr. Collins, cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, keeping his voice smooth and professional, I understand there may have been a misunderstanding, but we cannot allow guests without proper reservations or memberships. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." The way he said it was polite, but everyone could hear what he really meant. "You don't belong here." The waiter beside him smirked faintly, thinking the situation was already over. Some guests began to relax, assuming the old man would leave quietly, but he didn't. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his calm gaze meeting the manager's eyes. "I told you," he said softly, his voice steady as a stone. "I have a reservation." The room grew quieter. Even the whispers stopped. For a moment, there was something about the way he spoke, no anger, no desperation, just confidence. The manager hesitated. The waiter leaned in and whispered to him, just loud enough for the old man to hear. "Sir, I've checked twice. His name isn't there. Maybe he's lying. Happens sometimes with people like this." The old man slowly turned his eyes toward the waiter. Not a glare, not even a frown, just a slow, heavy look that made the young man's throat tighten. The waiter looked away quickly, pretending to adjust his tablet. Meanwhile, the guests started whispering again. At a table near the center, a middle-aged couple spoke in hushed voices. "Why isn't he leaving?" the woman whispered. "Maybe he's stubborn," the man replied, sipping his drink. "Or maybe he doesn't understand how exclusive this place is." Another guest, a man with a thick silver watch, leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Probably just wants to make a scene. People like him think they can get attention by causing trouble." The old man didn't move. His face didn't change, but his eyes, come deep and unblinking, seemed to notice everything. Every whisper, every smirk, every laugh. He finally spoke again, his voice so soft the nearest tables had to lean closer to hear. "Check again." The manager frowned, but something in the man's tone made him hesitate. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was a command wrapped in politeness. The waiter tapped on the tablet nervously, scrolling through the list once more. His fingers moved quickly, but his face turned pale as he scanned the screen. His smirk faded. He swallowed hard. The old man noticed. "Do you see it now?" He asked quietly. The waiter froze, his finger hovering over the screen. He opened his mouth to speak, but the manager grabbed the tablet from him before he could. Mr. Collins scrolled through the names, his brows furrowing, and then his hand stopped. For just a second, his confident posture faltered, his jaw tightened. His eyes flickered toward the old man. The guests couldn't see the screen, but they saw the manager's face change. Whispers grew louder. "What's going on? They find his name? Who is he?" The old man stood silently watching the manager. His face remained calm, but there was a glimmer in his eyes, now just a flicker, like a candle flame. The manager's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but he stopped himself, quickly locked the tablet hiding the screen, and handed it back to the waiter. Forced a smile, though his eyes betrayed him. "One moment, sir," the manager said, his voice tight. "We'll sort this out immediately." The old man gave a slow nod. "Good," he said simply. "I'll wait." He stepped aside, standing near the reception desk, his hands folded neatly behind his back. The waiter avoided his eyes. Guests kept watching, whispering louder now. "Something's not right," a man in the corner muttered. "The manager looks nervous. Who is that guy?" another asked. "Maybe he's someone important," a woman whispered, leaning forward eagerly. "Important? Look at him. It looks like he walked out of a bus station," another scoffed. The old man's expression didn't change. He didn't need to defend himself, because soon every whisper, every laugh, every mocking look would stop. The restaurant didn't know it yet, but they were all about to learn exactly what they were mocking. The room was still heavy with whispers as the elderly black man stood near the reception desk. The guests kept sneaking glances at him, their murmurs rising and falling like quiet waves. The live band kept playing, but even their soft jazz notes couldn't cover the tension in the air. The waiter, a young man with slick hair and a polished body, pretended to focus on the tablet in his hand. But every so often, his lips curled into a faint smirk. He had seen people like this before, or so he thought. People who walked in thinking they could blend in with the rich and powerful. People who didn't belong. He leaned closer, too. The manager, whispering, "Sir, I think he's just trying to cause trouble. His name can't possibly be on that list." The old man's sharp eyes flicked toward him. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But just that glance made the waiter's voice catch for a second. Still, the waiter couldn't help himself. He straightened. His Bodhi took a small step forward and addressed the man again, this time louder, so nearby tables could hear. "Sir," he said, his tone sweet but dripping with condescension, "this is a luxury dining club, a private one. Our members pay thousands every year just to eat here. We don't usually allow walk-ins." Some guests chuckled softly at his words. A woman at a table whispered, "Finally, someone's telling him." A man in a tuxedo snickered. "About time. This is embarrassing." The old man didn't react. His calm face stayed the same, his dark eyes fixed on the waiter like he was studying him. Then he said slowly, "I told you. I have a reservation." The waiter sighed dramatically, rolling his eyes just enough for the nearby diners to notice. He spoke again, louder this time. "I'm sure you believe you do, sir. But reservations here aren't for just anyone. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Maybe a different restaurant? Something more casual?" The words hung in the air like poison. The chuckles around the room turned into soft laughter now. A few guests shook their heads, amused by the scene. At one table, a young couple whispered to each other, "Why doesn't he just leave?" The woman said, "He's probably trying to get free food," the man replied with a smirk. "Or maybe he thinks making a scene will get him attention." The waiter, noticing the whispers, straightened his back as if he were a performer on a stage. He looked back at the old man, his fake smile wide and mocking now. "Sir," he said, his voice almost playful, "you understand that this place serves some of the most expensive dishes in the city? Our cheapest meal is more than most people's entire monthly paycheck. Are you sure this is where you want to be?" A soft ripple of laughter spread across the dining hall. The old man's posture didn't change. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look angry. He simply asked, in the same calm, steady voice, "Are you done?" The waiter froze for a second. Something in the man's tone, flat, unshaken, and far too calm, made the room quiet down slightly. The laughter softened, replaced by curious murmurs. The old man took one slow step forward, placing his hands on the counter. "I told you," he said again, his voice as steady as a heartbeat. "I have a reservation. And if you don't want to check again, perhaps I should speak to someone above you." The waiter's smirk faltered for the first time. The guests at the nearest tables leaned in, sensing a shift in the air. From the corner of the room, a new sound broke the silence, the distant click of high heels against marble. Another staff member, a woman in a sharp black suit, appeared. She glanced between the old man, the waiter, and the manager. Her face didn't show much, but her eyes narrowed slightly as they landed on the elderly guest. Before anyone could speak, the waiter muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous. Why can't people just know their place?" The old man's eyes flicked toward him again. Slowly, deliberately, the waiter felt something tighten in his chest, like the man wasn't just looking at him, but through him. He swallowed hard, suddenly aware that every mocking word, every smirk had been noted. The manager, noticing the tension, stepped forward. "Sir, please, there's no need for conflict. We're simply trying to maintain order for our paying members." His voice was smoother, more controlled than the waiter's, but there was still a hint of dismissal in it, still a hint of "you don't belong here." The old man finally broke his stillness. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. The guests around him tensed. Even the waiter took a small step back, his smirk gone now, replaced by a flicker of unease. The man's hand emerged slowly, not with anger, not with haste. In his fingers, he held a small black card. He set it gently on the counter in front of the manager. The waiter leaned closer, curious. Then he saw the card and his face went pale. It wasn't a credit card, wasn't a simple ID. It was a platinum membership card, the kind so rare. Only the highest elite in the country held one. The card was engraved with a name. The name. That made the manager's eyes widen slightly as he read it. Whispers spread again, sharper now. What is that? Is that a VIP card? Whose name is on it? The old man didn't speak, just stood there, calm as ever, waiting. And as the manager read the name again, his confident expression began to crack. The waiter, meanwhile, stood frozen. Every mocking word he had said replayed in his mind, echoing louder and louder. He didn't know yet who this man was. He knew enough now to realize he had just made a very, very big mistake. The black card sat on the polished counter like a shadow. The glossy surface caught the golden light from the chandeliers, and the engraved name gleamed faintly. The restaurant manager, Mr. Collins, stared at it for a moment, his fingers hovering above the card, but not touching it. He recognized the style immediately. The most exclusive members, people with power, wealth, and influence beyond imagination. Cards like this? But there was something else. The name. The moment his eyes landed on it, his confidence wavered. His jaw tightened. His hand trembled ever so slightly before he pulled it back, as though touching the card would burn him. The waiter leaned in to see. When his eyes caught the name, the color drained from his face. The smirk he'd been wearing for the last 10 minutes vanished like smoke. His hands gripped the tablet tighter, his knuckles turning white. The guests didn't know what the card meant yet, but they could sense the sudden change. Whispers started again, louder this time. What is it? Who is he? Did you see their faces? Something's wrong. At a nearby table, a young woman in a sparkling silver dress leaned toward her date. I think he might actually be someone important, she whispered. Her date shook his head. He can't be. Look at him. No driver, no suit. He's just some old guy. Probably borrowed that card. The old man stood silently as the room buzzed around him. His hands rested behind his back, his posture tall and steady. He wasn't smiling, but there was a strange calm in his expression, as though none of this surprised him. As if he'd seen scenes like this before. Finally, the manager cleared his throat and forced himself to speak. Excuse me for a moment? Sir, he said, his voice noticeably tighter than before. I'll need to verify this personally. The old man gave a slow nod. I'll wait, he said softly. His calm voice carried through the room, quiet but firm, making the nearby. Whispers falter for a second. Mr. Collins gestured for the waiter to follow him toward a side counter. Once they were out of the old man's earshot, the waiter whispered quickly, his voice shaky now. Sir, that can't be real, can it? That card, that name. The manager shot him a sharp look. Quiet, he hissed. Do you have any idea who this is? The waiter swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance crumbling. I don't. Exactly, but I've heard the name before. The manager's lips pressed into a thin line. He's not just a member, he's one of the owners. The waiter's eyes widened in horror. Oh, owners, as in this whole place. Yes, the manager said under his breath. Not just Le Royale, he owns part of the entire hotel chain. And more than that, his family name alone can ruin careers in seconds. The waiter's stomach turned cold. The whispers, the mocking tone, the laughter he had joined in it, all replayed in his head like a nightmare. His mouth went dry as he realized just how badly he'd misjudged the man standing only a few feet away. Meanwhile, the guests continued to murmur, unaware of the full truth. At a table near the band, a man whispered to his friend, Why do they look so scared? Who is he? Another leaned in, his voice low. I heard that name before. On the news. Isn't he some billionaire? The old man remained silent, his gaze moving slowly across the room. He didn't glare, he didn't frown. But every person who met his eyes felt an odd pressure, like his calm stare was heavier than words. The whispers grew softer as more people began to realize this was no ordinary guest. Mr. Collins returned to the counter, standing straighter now, though his hands betrayed a faint tremor. He picked up the black card carefully, almost reverently, and handed it back to the old man with both hands. Mr. Johnson, the manager said, his voice low but respectful, please forgive us for the misunderstanding. Your table is ready. Old man didn't move right away. He took the card slowly, sliding it back into his coat pocket. Then, in the same calm tone he'd spoken all evening, he asked, was it really a misunderstanding? Or was it something else? The question hung in the air like a weight. The waiter's throat tightened. The manager's jaw flexed, but he didn't respond. The surrounding guests, though they weren't part of the conversation, leaned in closer, feeling the tension ripple through the air. Finally, the old man broke the silence himself. Either way, he said softly, let's not waste any more time. Show me to my table. The manager nodded quickly, signaling another server to prepare the best seat in the house, a private corner table with a view of the city skyline. The whispers around the room swelled as the old man began to walk past the other diners. Who is he? They called him Mr. Johnson. Is that the Johnson? The one who donated millions to the city hospital? The one who owns half of downtown? As the murmurs spread, the waiter trailed behind, his face pale, his confidence gone. Every step felt heavier as guilt pressed down on him. He knew. The moment the dinner was over, his career at Le Royal might be over too. But for now, the old man said nothing, simply followed the manager, his calm steps echoing softly on the marble floor, as every pair of eyes in the restaurant followed him in stunned silence. And though no one dared to say it out loud, one thought lingered in every mind. This wasn't just a guest. This was someone powerful enough to change everything with a single word. The sound of soft jazz floated through the restaurant, but the calm, elegant atmosphere was gone. Every table was alive with whispers, heads turning to watch the elderly black man as he followed the manager across the marble floor. He walked slowly, his steps measured, his hands tucked behind his back. There was no anger in his face, no smug smile, no visible pride. But there was a stillness about him, a quiet strength, that made even the most confident diners sit a little straighter as he passed. The waiter trailed behind, his hands clasped. Nervously in front of him, his earlier arrogance was gone. His face, once smug and dismissive, now held only unease. Every step felt like a weight, dragging him further into trouble he wasn't sure he could escape. The whispers grew louder as the group passed each table. At one table, a man leaned close to his wife. Who is he? The manager's acting like he's royalty. His wife whispered back, I heard his name, Johnson. I think he's the Johnson. Another guest, a man with a glass of wine, murmured. To his date? The billionaire? The one who funded the children's hospital? Is the one who owns? He stopped when the old man's calm eyes flicked toward him for just a second. The man froze, suddenly quiet, as if caught doing something. Wrong, the old man wasn't glaring. He wasn't intimidating with words. But there was something about his presence that silenced people without effort. Every whisper felt risky, as though he could hear every word, even from across the room. Finally, they reached a corner of the restaurant. It wasn't just a table. It was the table, the one reserved only for the most important guests. A long window stretched beside it, revealing the city's skyline glittering in the night. The candles on the table were already lit, silverware polished to a mirror shine. Mr. Collins, the manager, gestured to the chair at the head of the table. Please, Mr. Johnson, he said, his tone full of respect now, allow us to serve. You, anything you desire, just say the word. The old man gave a small nod, pulling out the chair himself and sitting down slowly. He placed his hat neatly on the empty chair beside him. Then, as he looked around the room, his calm voice broke the silence. Before we begin, said softly, bring me a glass of water and make sure it's clean. The words were simple, but they carried weight. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't anger. But the tone made the waiter flinch, as though it was a reminder of how badly he'd judged this man minutes ago. The waiter nodded quickly, almost stumbling as he rushed to fetch the water. Around the restaurant, the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew. I can't believe they treated him like that, one woman whispered to her friend. I know, the friend replied. But look at him. Doesn't even need to raise his voice. He's just calm. Another diner muttered softly. Calm people are the scariest, especially when they're powerful. At a table near the Band, a man tapped his phone under the table. "I'm looking him up," he whispered to his date. Her eyes widened when she saw the screen. "Oh my God, he's not just a billionaire. He's on the board of the company that owns this whole chain." The whispers spread like wildfire now. Every diner who had laughed or mocked earlier was quiet, eyes darting toward the corner where the old man sat. Some felt shame, others felt fear, and a few just curiosity, wondering what would happen next. The waiter returned with a glass of water, his hands trembling slightly as he set it down on the table. The old man looked at it for a long moment before lifting it. He took a slow sip, then placed the glass back down gently. Finally, he looked up at the waiter. "What's your name?" asked quietly. The waiter swallowed hard. "Hey, David," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man nodded slowly. "David," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. Then he looked past him, toward the other staff members and the manager. His eyes didn't hold anger, but there was something in them. Something that made the hair on the back of David's neck stand up. The manager cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Johnson, please allow us to prepare your meal. Our chef will personally come too." The old man raised a hand, silencing him with a small gesture. "I'm not here for the food," he said softly. The room, already quiet, seemed to grow even more still. "Not tonight." The manager blinked, confused. "Sir." The old man leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze sweeping across the entire dining hall. His voice remained calm, but now it carried through the air like a low echo, reaching every corner of the room. "Do you know what I see when I walk into places like this?" he asked. The question wasn't directed at anyone, yet everyone felt it was meant for them. Silence. No one dared to speak. The old man continued. "I see people who believe they can measure a person's worth by the shine of their shoes, cut of their suit, or the car they step out of." His eyes moved slowly from table to table, catching the gaze of those who had laughed the loudest before. And when someone doesn't fit that image, they become invisible. Or worse, they become a target for your jokes. No one moved. Even the live band had gone silent now. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. The old man's voice softened even more. "You don't know me, but you assumed. All of you, and so did your staff." Da-da-da-da-da. His eyes lingered on the waiter for a moment, making David's chest tighten. "I've built a life where I no longer need to raise my voice, because my name alone speaks louder than any shout." He reached into his coat pocket again, pulling out a folded piece of paper, not the card this time. He set it on the table, sliding it toward the manager. "Do you know what this is?" The manager hesitated, then picked it up with careful hands. As his eyes scanned the paper, his face paled. It wasn't a receipt. It wasn't a note. It was a directive, a letter from the corporate board. A letter that bore Mr. Johnson's signature. And the company sealed. The manager's throat tightened. He knew what this meant. He knew what was coming next. But the old man didn't speak further. Not yet. He simply sipped his water again, his calm, steady presence filling the room like a storm about to break. Everyone in Le Royal could feel it now. Something was coming. And none of them, not the staff, not the diners, not even the manager, were ready for it. The candlelight flickered gently on the corner table, but the air in Le Royal felt heavy, almost suffocating. The elderly black man sat calmly in his chair, sipping his water, while every eye in the room remained locked on him. The whispers had faded now. No one dared to speak above a breath. At the other end of the restaurant, the manager, Mr. Collins, stood near the bar, his back to the guests. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter, the one bearing Mr. Johnson's signature and the company's seal. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. The head chef, noticing the tension, approached quietly. "Sir, what's happening?" he whispered. Mr. Collins shot him a sharp glance, then lowered his voice. "Do you know who that man is?" Chef frowned. "Some rich guy?" The manager's eyes narrowed. "He's not some rich guy. He owns part of this place, not just this location. The entire chain. The man you saw treated like a nobody a few minutes ago. can shut us down with one phone call. The chef's eyes widened slightly. His gaze drifted toward the corner table where Mr. Johnson sat, calm and still as though he had all the time. In the world, guests continued sneaking glances, their curiosity growing by the second. Mr. Collins wiped his forehead, his thoughts racing. He had to fix this. He had to keep the situation from turning into something worse. The corporate board, investors, the media, fist became a story. His career would be over. He motioned for David, the young waiter, to come closer. David's face was pale, his hands fidgeting nervously at his sides. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice quiet. Mr. Collins glared at him. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You mocked one of the most powerful men in this city in front of a full house.
Oh.
Do you know how fast this could ruin us?" David's throat tightened. "I didn't know," he stammered. "He looked like what?" The manager snapped, his whisper sharp, like he didn't belong. "Like he wasn't dressed like your idea of wealth. You think people like him need to prove themselves to you?" David swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. "I didn't mean save it," Collins cut in. "You'll be lucky if you still have a job by the end of the night." He straightened his jacket and drew in a deep breath. His polished shoes clicked softly on the marble floor as he began walking toward the corner table. Every guest who saw him move instinctively leaned closer, sensing something important was about to happen. The band, still silent, exchanged glances, their instruments resting on their laps. Even the kitchen staff peered out from the side doors, their curiosity overpowering their caution. Mr. Collins approached the table slowly, every step measured. Mr. Johnson didn't look up right away. He sat with his hands resting lightly on the table, his hat beside him, his gaze fixed out the tall window at the glowing city skyline. When the manager reached the table, he cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Johnson," he said carefully, his tone now filled with respect, "please allow me to apologize for everything that's happened this evening. Our staff made a mistake. I take full responsibility." Mr. Johnson finally turned his eyes toward him. There was no anger in his gaze, no frustration. Just that same deep calm that seemed to weigh heavier than any shout. "Do you?" Mr. Johnson asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but the weight behind it made the room seem even quieter. Mr. Collins nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I assure you, this will never happen again. I can personally." The old man raised a hand, cutting him off. He didn't need to raise his voice. The small gesture was enough to silence the manager instantly. "Do you know what I've learned, Collins?" Mr. Johnson said softly. His voice carried, somehow reaching even the nearest tables without rising above a normal tone. "People will smile at you when they think they need you. The moment they believe you are beneath them, the smile fades, and their true face appears." The manager's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but something in Mr. Johnson's eyes told him not to. Mr. Johnson leaned back slightly in his chair, his hands folding together. "Tell me, Collins," he said, his voice still calm, "is this how you run your restaurant? By judging who belongs and who doesn't? By teaching your staff to treat people by the shine of their clothes instead of the weight of their character?" Collins's lips parted, but no words came out. The guests watched in tense silence. Every eye in the room was on the two men now, even the ones who had mocked earlier. Finally, Mr. Johnson's gaze softened, not with kindness, but with finality. "I didn't come here to eat tonight," he said. "I came to see how this place was being run. And now, I've seen enough." The words hit like a sudden drop in temperature. The staff at nearby stations froze, exchanging nervous glances. David, standing a few feet away, felt his chest tighten. He knew what was coming, even before the next words left Mr. Johnson's mouth. "I will be calling a board meeting tomorrow," Mr. Johnson said, his tone even unshaken, "and we will be making some changes. Starting at the top." Gasps spread across the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. The tension was so thick now that even the faint sound of silverware from the kitchen felt deafening. Mr. Collins's face turned pale as the weight of the words sank in. He opened his mouth to protest, but stopped when Mr. Johnson raised a hand against Lowe. Calm, deliberate. "I've been patient tonight," Mr. Johnson said softly. "I let your staff show me who they really are. Now I'll make sure this place never forgets what respect means." He stood slowly, his tall frame straightening, his presence filling the room even more than before. The whispers returned, but they were hushed, nervous, as though no one wanted him to hear. Mr. Johnson placed his hat back on his head, adjusted his coat, and looked around the dining hall one last time. His deep, steady voice carried a final message: remember this night, not because of who I am, but because of who you chose to be. With that, he turned toward the exit, his steps calm, unhurried. As the entire restaurant watched in stunned silence, and behind him, the manager stood frozen, knowing his future and the future of Le Royale would be decided in the morning. The air inside Le Royale felt colder now, though the golden chandeliers still glowed warmly above. The soft music from the jazz band hadn't returned. The only sound was the faint echo of Mr. Johnson's footsteps as he made his way toward the tall double doors of the restaurant. Every head in the room turned to follow him. Some diners leaned forward, frozen mid-bite, their wine glasses untouched. Others whispered nervously, their voices trembling like they were afraid he might hear at a corner table. A woman whispered to her friend, "I can't believe it. I thought he was just some poor old man." Her friend nodded, her eyes wide. "Me too. But did you hear? He's not just rich. He owns this place." Across the room, a man who had laughed the loudest earlier shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He tugged at his cufflinks, lowering his voice. "We probably shouldn't have said what we did, if he remembers." His date shot him a glare. If he remembers, he heard everything, saw his eyes. He wasn't ignoring us. He was listening. Whispers rippled from table to table like waves. The more they spoke, the more the tension grew. The old man didn't look back. His calm, steady stride carried him past every guest, past every person who had judged him before they knew his name. Behind him, the young waiter stood frozen near the bar. His hands were cold, his chest felt heavy. He had mocked the man, smirked at him, spoke to him like he was dirt under his shoes, and now that same man could end his career with one phone call. The manager. Mr. Collins remained stiff near the corner table where Mr. Johnson had sat. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his mind spinning with dread. Tomorrow's board meeting echoed in his head like a warning bell, changes starting at the top. He knew exactly what that meant. As Mr. Johnson reached the center of the dining hall, the whispers fell quiet. Everyone watched him in silence now, their earlier arrogance gone, replaced by a mix of awe, fear, and respect. And then he stopped. Right in the middle of the room he paused, turning his head slightly toward the guests. For the first time that evening, his voice rose not loud, but firm enough for every person in the room to hear. "You all judged me," he said softly, his deep voice carrying through the silence. "Not because of my actions, it's not because of my words, but because of my appearance, because I didn't look like you thought I should." Let the words hang. In the air, his calm gaze sweeping across every table. "I didn't need to raise my voice tonight. I didn't need to argue, because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits." Some diners lowered their heads. Others shifted. In their seats, uncomfortable, under his steady gaze, Mr. Johnson's voice softened, but his words cut deeper. "Remember this, not for my sake, but for your own. Because one day, the person you laugh at may hold the pen that decides your future." With that, he adjusted his hat, turned back toward the doors, and continued walking. The double doors opened slowly as to silent staff members, ones who hadn't dared to mock. He pulled them aside. A gust of cool night air swept into the restaurant as he stepped outside. The sound of the city-distant cars, a faint horn, the hum of streetlights seeped in as he exited, and then just like that, he was gone. The doors closed gently behind him, leaving Le Royale in silence. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. It felt as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then slowly the murmurs returned. But they weren't mocking now. They were nervous, hushed. Every conversation was about the same thing. What's going to happen tomorrow? Did you see Collins's face? He's finished. Do you think that waiter will be fired too? Do you think he'll shut this whole place down? At the bar, David finally sat down on a stool, his hands shaking, stared at the polished surface of the counter, his reflection looking back at him. He didn't care about his job anymore. He didn't care about the tips he'd earned. All he could think about was the man's calm eyes. The way he had seen everything, every smirk, every whispered word. In the corner, Mr. Collins stood frozen, the letter still in his hand. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He knew the night wasn't over. The real storm was coming in the morning, and as the diners slowly returned to their meals, the music still silent, one truth settled in everyone's mind. The man they had mocked had left quietly, but his shadow still lingered. And no one in Le Royale would ever forget the night Mr. Johnson walked out. The morning sun cut through the glass walls of a tall skyscraper, spilling golden light across the polished floor of a massive boardroom. The city below buzzed with traffic and noise, but inside the room there was only silence. The kind of silence that came before something big. A long mahogany table stretched through the room, surrounded by leather chairs. At the head of the table sat Mr. Johnson, calm as always, dressed in a simple dark suit. His hands were folded in front of him, his hat resting on the table beside him. Around him sat a dozen board members, men and women, in expensive suits, each shifting nervously in their seats. At the far end of the room, the glass doors opened. Mr. Collins, the manager of Le Royale, stepped inside. His polished shoes clicked softly on the floor, but his usual confidence was gone. His face was pale, his eyes heavy with worry. In his hands he clutched a folder of reports. Though everyone in the room knew no piece of paper would save him today, the doors closed behind him with a quiet thud. The sound echoed through the room, making his chest tighten even more. "Mr. Collins?" Mr. Johnson said finally, his voice calm but firm. "Please, sit." Collins hesitated for a second, then walked slowly to the empty chair at the side of the table. The leather creaked softly as he sat down, his hands fidgeting on the folder in front of him. The board members glanced at each other. Some looked sympathetic, others cold and distant, as if they already knew what decision would be made. Mr. Johnson leaned back slightly, his eyes scanning the room. "I called this meeting," he began, his deep voice steady, "because last night I saw something that cannot continue." No one spoke. No one even shifted in their seat. They just listened. "I walked into a restaurant I partly own, Mr. Johnson continued, and I was treated like I was less than human. Not because of anything I said, not because of anything I did, but because I didn't look like what they expected." His gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on Mr. Collins. The manager swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Some of you may think that's not important," Mr. Johnson said, his voice calm but sharp now. "But when a place like Le Royale treats people this way, it doesn't just hurt feelings, it hurts business. It destroys reputations. And it tells the world that our brand is built on arrogance, not excellence." A murmur spread among the board members, but it was quickly silenced when Mr. Johnson raised a hand. "I don't care how expensive our meals are. I don't care how exclusive our membership list is. Respect is not optional for anyone." His words hung heavy in the air. Finally, he turned his full attention to Mr. Collins. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Collins opened his mouth, his voice shaky. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't know it was you." If I had, the old man's calm gaze sharpened slightly. "That's exactly the problem," he said softly. "You think respect is something you give only when you know who someone is. But true leadership, true hospitality, means you treat everyone as if they matter, because they do." Collins lowered his eyes, his hands gripping the folder tightly. He had no defense. Every excuse sounded hollow before he even spoke it. Mr. Johnson tapped the table lightly with his fingers. It's a soft sound echoing in the quiet room. "I've already spoken with the board," he said finally, "and we've made a decision." Collins's chest tightened. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Effective immediately, Mr. Johnson said, "You are relieved of your position. As manager of Le Royale, you'll be given a severance package, nothing more." Collins's face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came out. He wanted to argue, to beg, But the weight of Mr. Johnson's voice and the silent agreement of every board member in the room told him it would be useless. Slowly, he nodded. "I understand," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Mr. Johnson didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded once, as though it was just another business matter, nothing more. But before Collins could stand to leave, Mr. Johnson's voice came again, softer now, but colder. "Before you go," he said, "remember, you didn't lose your job because of me. You lost it because you forgot what your job was. You were supposed to lead, to set the example. Instead, you showed your staff that judgment comes before service, that pride comes before respect. That will never happen in a place with my name on it." The words struck harder than the firing itself. Collins lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly, and rose from his seat. The leather chair creaked softly as he stepped away from the table. The glass doors opened again. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he walked out of the room. No one looked at him. No one spoke. The doors closed behind him with the same quiet thud as before. Silence filled the boardroom once more. Only Mr. Johnson's calm presence seemed to break it. Finally, he turned to the rest of the board. "We will find someone new to run LaRoyal," he said simply. "Someone who understands that our reputation is worth more than gold-plated menus and velvet curtains. Someone who knows respect costs nothing, but means everything." The board members nodded quietly, their expressions serious. They had seen last night's reports. They had seen the way the story was already spreading online, whispers of the incident reaching the press. And they all knew one thing. Mr. Johnson's calm voice wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. The meeting ended soon after. Mr. Johnson stood, adjusted his hat, and stepped toward the glass doors. His reflection glided across the polished floor as the morning light followed him out, and as he left the skyscraper, stepping into the bustling city below. One truth became clear to everyone who had witnessed the events of the last 12 hours. Mr. Johnson didn't need to shout to change everything. He just needed to show up, let the world reveal itself. The morning sun was still bright, but for Mr. Collins, the world felt dim. He stepped out of the skyscraper's glass doors, his polished shoes clicking on the concrete, in his hand. He carried only a slim envelope, official letter confirming his termination and a severance check. The career he had spent years building was over. In one night, people bustled around him, rushing to work, laughing, making phone calls. To them, it was just another day. But to Collins, every sound felt distant, muted, as though he was walking in a world where time had slowed. He walked toward the parking lot, his chest heavy, his mind racing. Every step echoed in his head, each one pulling him further from the life he thought he controlled. His car, a sleek black sedan he had been so proud of, suddenly felt smaller, like it no longer represented success, but a reminder of his failure. He slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The envelope lay on the passenger seat, the company's logo glaring up at him like an accusation. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was a text from one of his colleagues at LaRoyal. "It's already on social media. Someone filmed last night. Be careful." Collins's stomach turned cold, unlocked his phone, and opened his browser. Within seconds, he saw it. Clips of the previous night, captured by diners, videos of him standing near the bar, pale and nervous, while Mr. Johnson sat calmly at the corner table. Snippets of whispers. "Who is he? He owns this place. Collins is done." Thousands of comments filled the screens. "Manager humiliates the wrong man. Old man shows them what power really is. Respect everyone because you never know who you're talking to." Some comments tagged news channels, others mocked Collins directly. His name, his face, the restaurant's name all spreading. Like wildfire, he closed the phone, his hands shaking. It wasn't just his job that was gone. His reputation was burning in real time. Every hotel and restaurant owner in the city would see those clips by the end of the day. No one would want to hire him now. His chest tightened, his breath uneven. In all his years as a manager, he had thought power came from his position, from the title on his nameplate. But last night had shown him something different. Real power didn't need a title. It didn't need to yell. No. It didn't even need to lift a finger. No. It just needed presence. Collins gripped the steering wheel harder, his thoughts racing. What do I even do now? A soft knock on his car window startled him. He turned to see David, the young waiter from last night, standing nervously outside. Collins rolled the window down halfway. "What do you want, David?" he said, his voice tired. David hesitated. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." Collins let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Sorry won't change anything. You and I both know it." David's shoulders slumped. "I know, but what do you think's going to happen to us now? To the restaurant?" Collins stared ahead at the traffic beyond the lot. "Johnson will probably keep it running," he said quietly. "But it won't be the same. People will be watching now. Every move, every word. He'll make sure no one ever forgets what happened last night." David nodded slowly. He looked like he wanted to ask something else, but instead he stepped back. "Good luck, sir," he said softly. Collins didn't respond. He rolled the window up and started the car. As the engine hummed, he glanced at the skyscraper in his rearview mirror. The sun reflected off its glass walls, blinding for a second, as if to remind him just how small he was now. And as he pulled out of the lot, one thought burned in his mind, heavier than the loss of his job, heavier than the shame online. If I had treated that man with respect, just as a human being, none of this would have happened. The regret settled deep in his chest, a weight he knew he'd carry for a long time. Meanwhile, high above the city, in his private office, Mr. Johnson stood by a window overlooking the skyline. He had seen the same videos spreading online. Had heard the whispers, the praise, the judgment. But his expression remained calm, his hands folded behind his back. He didn't care about going viral, didn't care about revenge. What mattered to him was simple, making sure no one in Le Royale or anywhere else he touched forgot that respect wasn't just a courtesy. It was the foundation of everything. And for Mr. Johnson, this was only the beginning of the changes he planned to make. The city outside was loud cars honking, horns echoing, voices blending into a constant hum. But inside Mr. Johnson's private office, there was only calm. The soft ticking of a clock filled the space as morning lights streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the sleek wooden floor. Mr. Johnson stood at his desk, a pen in hand, reviewing documents. His movements were slow, deliberate. Every signature, every note he made seemed purposeful. For him, the chaos of last night was not a distraction, it was motivation. Behind him, his assistant Claire stepped quietly into the room. She was young, composed, with a tablet in her hand. "Sir," she said softly, "the news outlets are all calling. They want a statement about what happened at Le Royale." Mr. Johnson didn't look up from his papers. "No statement," he said calmly. "They can talk all they want. We don't need to defend ourselves. We just need to act." Claire nodded. "Yes, sir. They're nervous. They're nervous. The ones who were there last night are worried they'll lose their jobs." Mr. Johnson finally set the pen down, turning to face her. His deep, calm eyes held no anger, only a quiet authority. "Some will," he said. "Others will learn. But this is not just about punishment. This is about building something better." Walked to the tall window, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the city. "Do you know why I went to that restaurant last night without telling anyone?" Claire hesitated, then shook her head. "No, sir. Because when people don't know who's watching," Mr. Johnson said softly, "their true character comes out. And I wanted to see who was running my place. Not on paper, not in reports, but in reality." He turned back to her, his voice steady. "What I saw was arrogance, fear, weak leadership. And worst of all, a culture that judged people before they even spoke." Claire lowered her eyes slightly, and now. She asked quietly, Mr. Johnson's gaze hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. Now, we fix it. Quietly, permanently. Walked back to his desk, pulling a folder from the stack. Inside was a list of named staff members, from waiters to supervisors. Next to each name were notes, observations, and, for some, red marks. These are the people who need to go, he said, tapping a finger on the list. They've shown they can't represent what this company stands for. Arrogance has no place. Here, Claire nodded, taking the folder and the rest. Mr. Johnson's tone softened slightly. They stay.
Right.
But they will be trained, not just in service, but in respect. Every person who walks through our doors, whether they're dressed in silk or in rags, will feel like they belong. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as he thought. And Collins. His voice paused. The name alone carried a weight. Replacing him will not be easy. We need someone who understands people, not just profits. Someone who can lead by example. Claire hesitated. I have some candidates in mind. Should I arrange interviews? Mr. Johnson shook his head slowly. No, I'll choose them myself. I don't want another manager who looks good on paper, but forgets what matters. The clock ticked softly, each sound filling the quiet office, like a reminder that change was already in motion. After a moment, Claire asked, And what about the press? They're saying you embarrassed the staff. Some are calling it a power move. Mr. Johnson's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not joy. Not pride, but something closer to understanding. Let them call it what they want. He said, I didn't go there to humiliate anyone. I went there to remind them and everyone watching that respect is not earned by wealth, and it can't be taken by arrogance. He stood once more, his tall frame casting a shadow across the desk. By the time I'm done, he said quietly, Le Royal won't just be the most luxurious restaurant in the city. It will be the most respected. People will come not just for the food, but because they know the moment they step inside, they matter. Claire nodded, her expression firm now. Yes, sir. I'll start the arrangements. As she left the room, Mr. Johnson turned back to the window. The city stretched endlessly before him, alive with movement. He could already picture the changes, taking shape, new faces, new training, a new standard for every employee. And though he stood alone, his presence filled the room like a quiet storm. For Mr. Johnson, this wasn't just about one restaurant. It was about setting a tone for every place his name touched. A tone that said, respect isn't given because of who you are. It's given because of who we choose to be. And as the morning sun climbed higher, the quiet plan that had begun with one humiliating night was about to reshape everything. The afternoon sun was warm as it poured through the tall glass windows of Le Royale. The restaurant was quiet now, empty of guests. Chairs were neatly stacked, the polished marble floors reflecting every beam of light. But for David, the young waiter, the silence felt heavy like a judgment waiting to fall. He stood near the service counter, his uniform crisp, but his hands trembling. Every second felt longer than the last. His manager, Collins, had been fired. Half the staff who had mocked or ignored Mr. Johnson were already gone. Now it was his turn to face the man himself. The double doors at the back opened, and Claire, Mr. Johnson's assistant, stepped in. Her heels clicked softly on the floor as she approached him. Mr. Johnson wants to see you, she said simply. Her tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. David swallowed hard, nodding. His chest felt tight as he followed her down the hall, past the empty dining area, to the private office upstairs. Every step echoed loudly in his ears. His thoughts were a storm. What do I even say? I mocked him. I treated him like he didn't belong. I deserved to be fired. But what if there's a chance to fix it? The office door opened and there he was, Mr. Johnson. He sat at a wide wooden desk, a pen in his hand, reviewing papers. The sunlight behind him cast a soft glow around his figure, making him look larger than life. Just calm. David stepped inside, his heart pounding. Claire closed the door behind him, leaving him alone with the man he had disrespected. For a moment, there was only silence. The faint ticking of a clock filled the air. David didn't dare speak. He felt like a child standing before a teacher, waiting for punishment. Finally, Mr. Johnson looked up. His deep eyes studied David quietly, as if weighing his soul. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "David, do you know why you're here?" Nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, because of last night." Mr. Johnson's gaze stayed steady. "And what exactly happened last night?" David hesitated, his throat dry. I judged you. Treated you like you didn't belong. I was rude. I was wrong." Mr. Johnson didn't move. His calm expression didn't change. "Why? Why did you treat me that way?" David swallowed hard. He wanted to find an excuse, but none came. "Because I thought you were just some old man who couldn't afford to be there," he admitted softly. "I thought you weren't important. I was trying to impress the other guests by keeping things exclusive." Mr. Johnson leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes narrowing not with anger, but thought. "So," he said slowly, "you thought respect was something only important people deserved?" David lowered his head. "Yes, sir," he whispered. The silence stretched. David's palms were sweating. He knew this was at the moment that would decide everything. Finally, Mr. Johnson stood. His tall frame loomed over the desk as he walked around it, stopping a few feet from David. The old man's voice stayed calm, but each word carried weight. "You know, David, I've been in your shoes before. A long time ago, before I owned anything, I was just a young man working tables. People judged me every day, by my clothes, by my skin, by my silence. Some treated me like I was invisible, others like I was worthless." David looked up, his eyes widening slightly. Mr. Johnson's gaze stayed fixed on him. "I told myself back then," the old man continued, "that if I ever had the power to change things, I would make sure no one working under me forgot what it feels like to be on the other side." He paused, his voice softening slightly. "Last night, you forgot. You forgot that every person who walks through those doors is a guest, not a number, not a status symbol. A guest." David's chest tightened. He nodded quickly. "I understand, sir. I do. I'm sorry. I'll pack my things." But Mr. Johnson raised a hand, stopping him. His calm voice carried a tone David didn't expect. "I didn't call you here to fire you," he said. David blinked, stunned. His breath caught in his throat. Mr. Johnson continued. "I called you here to give you a choice. You can walk out that door and leave, like the others who didn't care to learn. Or you can stay. But if you stay, things will change. For you, it's for this place. You'll go through training. Not just how to serve, but how to see people. How to understand that respect costs nothing but means everything." David's eyes widened. I can stay." Mr. Johnson nodded slowly. "Yes, but only if you're willing to start over. No ego. Number. Judgment. From now on, every person you serve is important, whether they wear a gold watch or a worn-out coat." David's voice trembled as he nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." For the first time, Mr. Johnson's expression softened slightly. "Good," he said simply. "Because respect isn't just for the rich, David, and the sooner. You learn that, the better your future will be, both here and beyond." He turned, walking back to his desk. The meeting was over, but his calm presence lingered like a lesson carved into stone. David bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly before leaving the office. As the door closed behind him, David exhaled deeply. His chest felt lighter, not because he had kept his job, but because he had been given something far more important, a second chance, and deep down he knew, if he ever forgot this lesson again, there would not be a third. The next 2 weeks were unlike anything LaRoya had ever seen. The once glamorous restaurant, famous for its gold-plated menus and expensive wines, felt like a completely different place. Gone were the arrogant whispers in the dining hall. Gone were the waiters who rolled their eyes at ordinary customers. The staff that remained stood taller, sharper, not out of fear, but because they knew something had changed. And at the center of it all was Mr. Johnson. Every morning, he arrived before the first shift, walking through the dining room with a calm, watchful gaze. He didn't bark orders. He didn't raise his voice. But everyone felt his presence. No one wanted to disappoint him. The training sessions began the very first day after. Collins was removed. Mr. Johnson brought in instructors not for wine pairing or silverware polishing, but for something deeper. Empathy training, the instructors called it. The waiters were told to spend time outside the restaurant, visiting shelters, soup kitchens, and busy street markets, not to serve, but to observe. To see people not as wallets or problems, but as humans. At first, the staff resisted. Some muttered that it was a waste of time. But when Mr. Johnson entered the room on the second day and said, in his calm, commanding voice, "Anyone who refuses this training can collect their final paycheck today," not a single person walked out. David, the young waiter, felt the change most deeply, every day. As he listened to the lessons and watched the world, outside he thought about that night, the look in Mr. Johnson's eyes, the quiet disappointment. He didn't just want to keep his job anymore. He wanted to earn it. Back inside Le Royale, changes continued. The menu stayed luxurious, but the atmosphere softened. The velvet ropes that once separated members-only areas were removed. The rule requiring formal suits for all guests was relaxed. Now anyone who could afford the meal could enjoy it, no matter what they wore. Some regulars grumbled. A wealthy couple muttered one night, "This place is losing its exclusivity." But when Mr. Johnson personally approached their table, leaning slightly on his cane, and said quietly, "Exclusivity doesn't feed the soul. Respect does," they said nothing more. Soon the whispers outside the restaurant began to shift. People weren't just talking about the incident anymore. They were talking about the change, about how Le Royale treated every guest with the same care, whether they arrived in a limousine or a taxi. Some even said the food tasted better not because the recipes changed, but because the air felt lighter, warmer, more welcoming. But not everyone was happy. Across the city, other luxury restaurants took notice. Their owners muttered in private meetings, "If Johnson keeps this up, he'll ruin the high-class market," one said bitterly. "He's turning luxury into charity," another complained. But as weeks passed, they began to notice something. Le Royale wasn't losing customers. It was gaining more. Not just the wealthy, but celebrities, entrepreneurs, and travelers who had heard whispers of the restaurant that treats everyone like royalty. Reservations doubled, then tripled. Soon, people were waiting weeks just to get a table. And yet Mr. Johnson remained calm through it all. He wasn't interested in headlines or profit spikes. His focus was still on the staff. One evening, as the last diners left and the lights dimmed, Mr. Johnson gathered the employees. They stood in a circle in the empty dining hall, the chandeliers glowing softly above them. David stood near the back, watching closely. Mr. Johnson's deep voice carried through the room. "When I walked in here weeks ago, I wasn't looking to test you. I wasn't looking for a reason to fire anyone. I was looking for something far more important, to see if this place had a heart." He let the words hang for a moment, his calm eyes sweeping across the faces of the staff. "That night I didn't find it. But now, I think we're on the right path." The employees exchanged glances. Some nodded. Others simply listened, feeling the weight of his words. Mr. Johnson continued, "This restaurant will always be luxurious. The food will always be the best. But what will make us truly great is how we treat people. Every guest who walks through that door will leave feeling valued, not just impressed." He paused, his voice softening slightly. "If any of you forget that, you won't need me to fire you, because the kind of people we're building here won't stand beside anyone who treats others as less." There was silence. Then slowly the staff began to clap. It wasn't loud or forced. It was steady, genuine, filled with respect, not just for Mr. Johnson, but for the new life he had given the place. And then, as the sound faded, Mr. Johnson simply nodded. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start again. Not as the old Le Royale, but as something better." And with that, he He adjusted his hat, turned, and walked out into the cool night air. Doors closed softly behind him, leaving the staff standing in the golden glow of the chandeliers. For the first time in years, Le Royal didn't just feel like a restaurant. It felt alive. It was a Friday evening, 3 weeks after the night everything had changed. The golden chandeliers of Le Royal glowed brighter than ever, reflecting off polished tables and crystal glasses. The restaurant was packed every seat, filled a long list of reservations still waiting. The atmosphere was warm, calm, but alive. And then, the same group of wealthy diners who had laughed at Mr. Johnson that night walked in. 4 men and 2 women. Dressed in designer suits and sparkling jewelry, stepped through the door with the same air of superiority as before. But this time, they paused almost immediately. The vibe of the restaurant felt different. The soft jazz played the same. The chandeliers still sparkled. But there was something in the air, something they couldn't name. A hostess greeted them with a genuine smile. "Good evening. Welcome to Le Royal. Do you have a reservation?" One of the men, a tall figure with slicked back hair, smirked. "We always have a reservation, under Parker." And the hostess checked her tablet, nodded politely, and led them to a large round table near the center of the dining room. The group sat down, looking around curiously. They whispered to each other. "This place feels different." "Yeah, I heard the manager got fired. Johnson took over. I wonder if we'll see him tonight." Their voices carried just loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear. But instead of rolling eyes or whispered judgments from the staff, all they saw were polite smiles and quiet efficiency. The waiters, including David, moved gracefully, attentive but calm, treating everyone the same, whether they were ordering the most expensive wine or just a simple glass of water. The group noticed it, and it unsettled them. As their meals arrived, one of the women leaned closer to the tall man, whispering, "This feels strange. Last time, people were watching us. Now, it's like no one cares who we are." The man chuckled quietly, shaking his head. Good, maybe Johnson finally realized we're the kind of guests he needs. But just as the words left his mouth, a familiar figure stepped into the dining room, Mr. Johnson. He wore the same simple dark suit as always, his hat resting neatly in his hand. His calm, commanding presence turned heads as he walked across the floor, his cane tapping softly against the marble. The staff stood a little straighter, not out of fear, but out of respect. Even the jazz band softened their playing slightly as though acknowledging his arrival. The group froze. Memories of that humiliating night hit them like a wave, the whispers, the way they had laughed. The moment they learned who he really was, Mr. Johnson walked slowly past their table, his deep eyes scanning the room, making sure everything was running smoothly. For a brief moment, his gaze landed on them. Not cold, not angry, just steady. It was enough to make their laughter fade. The tall man cleared his throat, suddenly focused on cutting his steak. The women exchanged glances, lowering their voices to a whisper. Finally, Mr. Johnson stopped near their table. He didn't sit. He didn't raise his voice, simply rested one hand on his cane and spoke, his tone calm but unmistakably firm. "Good evening," he said softly. "I see you've returned." The group nodded quickly, their usual arrogance gone. One of the women managed a nervous smile. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. We heard the restaurant has changed. We wanted to see it for ourselves." Mr. Johnson's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "It has changed," he said. "Not for you, not for me, for everyone." His eyes swept briefly across the table. "I hope you enjoy your meal, and I hope you'd notice the difference." He gave a small nod and continued walking, his presence lingering like a quiet storm even as he moved toward another part of the restaurant. The group sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, the tall man exhaled, muttering under his breath, "He didn't even have to threaten us. Just standing here." I felt it, the others nodded quietly. Didn't know if it was fear, respect, or something in between. But one thing was clear. Le Royal wasn't their playground anymore. It wasn't anyone's playground. For the rest of the evening, they stayed quiet, their usual loud chatter replaced by careful words. And when they finally left, tipping generously, they didn't smirk or boast like before. They simply walked out into the night, their voices low. The memory of Mr. Johnson's calm gaze lingering like a shadow. The morning sun was soft as it rose over the city, painting the skyline gold. Outside La Royale, reporters and camera crews gathered, microphones in hand, waiting for someone to speak. For weeks, whispers about the mystery owner had spread like wildfire. Clips from that night, the night Mr. Johnson walked in and changed everything, were still trending online. People wanted answers. Who was this man? Why had he stayed silent while his restaurant transformed? And why hadn't he given a single interview? That morning, they finally got their chance. The glass doors opened, and Mr. Johnson stepped outside. He wore his familiar dark suit, his hat tilted slightly forward, his cane tapping softly on the concrete. He didn't flinch at the flash of cameras or the crowd pressing closer. He simply stood on the stone steps, his calm gaze sweeping across. The reporters, the murmurs stopped. Every microphone pointed toward him. For a moment, there was only silence, a kind of heavy, expectant quiet that made every sound sharper. Then a reporter at the front called out, "Mr. Johnson, can you tell us why you went to La Royale that night, unannounced?" Mr. Johnson's deep voice carried effortlessly over the crowd. "I didn't go there to make a scene," he said. "I didn't go there to test anyone. I went because I wanted to see the truth of my own business with my own eyes, not through reports or numbers." He paused, letting the words settle. "I found a place that had forgotten what it meant to serve people, a place that believed. Respect was something reserved for the wealthy, not for everyone. That was a mistake. And it was my responsibility to correct it." Another reporter raised her hand quickly. "Why didn't you reveal who you were that night? Why let them treat you that way?" Mr. Johnson's expression stayed calm. "Because when people don't know who you are, they reveal who they are," he said. "And what I saw told me everything I needed to know." The crowd murmured quietly. Every word he spoke felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. A third reporter stepped forward, his voice eager. "Some people are calling what you did a power move, publicly embarrassing your staff. Was that your goal?" Mr. Johnson's steady gaze shifted to him. "I didn't humiliate anyone," he said firmly. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. All I did was exist in a space where people thought I didn't belong. The humiliation came from their own choices, not mine." The murmurs grew louder. The cameras zoomed closer. For weeks, people had debated his intentions. Was he a cold billionaire? Or something else? Mr. Johnson's voice softened slightly, but his words carried even stronger now. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to remind everyone, my employees, my guests, and anyone watching, that respect is not a privilege. It's not something you give because of wealth or status or appearance. It's something you give because it's the right thing to do." He rested his hand lightly on the head of his cane, his presence commanding without effort. "Me be clear," he added, his tone deepening. "As long as my name is on the door, La Royale will never be a place where arrogance is more important than dignity. It will remain a place of excellence. Yes, but also of humanity." The reporters scribbled notes furiously. The cameras clicked nonstop. But none of it seemed to faze him. One final question came from the back. "Mr. Johnson, people say your restaurant is becoming too inclusive. Some critics claim you're ruining its exclusivity. What do you say to them?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Exclusivity may build an image," he said quietly. "But respect builds a legacy, and I am not here for an image. I am here to build something that will outlive every critic in this crowd." With that, he adjusted his hat, turned, and began walking back inside. The cameras flashed faster. The reporters shouted more questions. But Mr. Johnson didn't look back. The glass doors closed behind him, leaving the crowd buzzing with energy. Within minutes, his words were everywhere on news broadcasts, across social media, on the lips of every guest planning to dine at La Royale. And by the end of the day, one thing was certain: Mr. Johnson wasn't just the mysterious owner of a famous restaurant anymore. He was a symbol, a reminder that real power didn't come from shouting or from wealth alone. It came from calm presence and the courage to stand for something bigger. The evening at Le Royal was quiet but full. Every table was filled, the warm glow of the chandeliers bouncing off polished silverware and glass. Soft jazz hummed in the background, and waiters moved like clockwork. Carrying trays with precision, Mr. Johnson sat at his usual corner table, a cup of tea steaming softly. In front of him, he preferred the spot not because it was hidden, but because it gave him a full view of the room. Every detail mattered to him, how the staff smiled, how the guests felt, how smoothly the night ran. But tonight, something unusual caught his attention. Through the tall glass doors, a figure entered. A man, maybe in his late 40s, wearing a simple coat and carrying nothing but a worn leather bag. He looked out of place not because of his clothes, but because of the way he stood, still, quiet, observant. The hostess greeted him warmly. But before she could lead him to a table, his eyes scanned the room and locked directly on Mr. Johnson. And then he walked straight toward him. The restaurant seemed to quiet slightly as the man approached. David, the young waiter, froze near. The bar, watching closely, something about the man felt different. When he reached the corner table, he stopped. For a long moment, the two men just stared at each other, Mr. Johnson calm and composed, the visitor unreadable. Finally, Mr. Johnson spoke, his deep voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." The man set his worn bag on the floor and pulled out a chair, sitting without waiting for permission. His voice was low, rough, as he replied, "You never expect me, do you? I always find you when it matters." David exchanged a glance with another waiter. Who was this man? No one had ever spoken to Mr. Johnson like that. Mr. Johnson leaned back slightly, his calm eyes never leaving the visitor. "So why now?" he asked quietly. "After all these years?" The man rested his elbows on the table, his hands clasped together. "Because the world is watching you again," he said. "And not everyone is happy about it. There are people, powerful people, who think you're changing too much, making enemies you don't even see yet." Mr. Johnson's expression didn't shift. "I don't care about enemies," he said calmly. "I care about the people who walk through those doors." The man gave a faint, almost bitter smile. "And that's why I'm here. Because if you keep this up, you're going to need someone. Watching your back. The kind of someone who doesn't mind getting his hands dirty." For the first time, a flicker of something, maybe curiosity, maybe caution, passed across Mr. Johnson's face. "You're offering to work for me again?" Man nodded slowly. "Not as a favor. It's a necessity. You've built something here. Something different. But different things attract attention. Some people don't like change. They'll try to hurt you or what you've built just to prove a point." Mr. Johnson sipped his tea, the steam curling in the warm light. After a moment, he said softly, "And what do you want in return?" The man's rough voice dropped even lower. "Nothing, except a seat at the table. Not here, in this restaurant. I mean the real table. The one where decisions are made before the world even hears about them." The silence that followed was heavy. David, from across the room, held his breath. The other staff didn't dare move too loudly. They all felt it that this conversation was about something far bigger than Le Royal. Finally, Mr. Johnson set his cup down. "Fine," he said quietly. "But understand this. I don't run my businesses with threats or shadows. If you stand with me, you follow my rules. Respect first, always." The man gave a slow nod. "If someone tries to tear this down..." Mr. Johnson's eyes narrowed, his voice still calm, but sharper now. "Then we handle it my way." The man leaned back in his chair, studying him. After a long pause, a faint grin crossed his face. "Still the same, aren't you? Calm on the outside, storm on the inside?" Mr. Johnson didn't respond. He simply reached for his cane, standing with a quiet strength. "Enjoy your meal," he said. "We'll talk more." After closing, the visitor nodded, his eyes glinting with something between respect and warning. As Mr. Johnson walked away, the room seemed to exhale. The jazz swelled softly again, conversations resumed, and the tension melted, at least for now. But for those who had seen the exchange, David, the staff, even a few guests one thought lingered in their minds, who was that man? and what exactly was coming next for La Royale and its mysterious owner. The next evening at La Royale began like any other. Soft jazz floated through the air, chandeliers shimmered, and the scent of rich dishes drifted from the kitchen. The restaurant was full, every table booked, every waiter moving with precision. But behind the calm, there was a tension in the air. The mysterious visitor from the night before had not returned, yet whispers spread quietly among the staff. Who was he? Why did he speak to Mr. Johnson like that? Is something about to happen? David, the young waiter, felt it the most. He had never seen Mr. Johnson speak so quietly, yet with so much weight. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. As the night went on, a few familiar faces entered. Not guests, not ordinary customers. Men in dark suits, the kind who didn't bother with menus. They weren't here for dinner. They were here for him. David noticed first. One of the men leaned against the wall near the entrance, speaking quietly into an earpiece. Another walked the dining area, his eyes scanning every detail but never lingering on the food or decor. Finally, a third man, older and sharply dressed, approached Mr. Johnson's table. He didn't sit, simply stood, hands clasped behind his back, and said in a low voice, "They're ready for you. The board is waiting." Every waiter within earshot froze. The board. No one at La Royale had ever heard that word spoken like that. It wasn't the restaurant's board. This was something higher. Mr. Johnson set down his cup of tea, adjusting his hat. He didn't seem surprised. He didn't even look up at the man. He simply replied, "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes, after the guests are settled." The man nodded once and stepped back, disappearing into the shadows near the door. David's curiosity burned. He had served Mr. Johnson tea, carried his notes, followed his rules for weeks, but he still had no idea who this man really was. And now he could tell whatever was about to happen would answer every question. Mr. Johnson stood, his cane tapping lightly on the marble floor as he crossed the room. Every guest turned to glance at him, some recognizing him from the news, others simply sensing the quiet power he carried. He paused at the center of the dining room, turning slightly toward the staff. "Keep the service smooth," he said calmly, his deep voice carrying across the room without effort. "Every guest here deserves our full attention till I return." And with that, he pushed open the tall side doors and stepped out into the night. The three suited men following him. Outside, a black car waited. Its tinted windows reflected the glow of the streetlights. The men guided him in, and the car slipped quietly through the streets, away from the noise of the city, until it reached a tall glass building at the edge of downtown. The building had no signs, no logos, only a single word etched into the glass near the entrance: Consortium. Inside, the air was cool and silent. An elevator carried them to the top floor, where a massive room waited, walls lined with screens showing maps, stock markets, and news feeds from around the world. At a long, polished table sat a dozen figures, all in dark suits, faces stern. They didn't rise when Mr. Johnson entered. They didn't greet him with warmth, but they watched him closely, carefully, as if waiting for him to speak first. Mr. Johnson walked to the head of the table, resting his hand lightly on his cane. For a moment he said nothing. Silence was heavy, charged like the air before a storm. Finally, one of the figures spoke, his voice low but sharp. "You've drawn attention again, Johnson. The media, the public, everyone is talking about you. Some of us think you're making yourself a target. Others think you're think you're changing too much, too quickly." Mr. Johnson's calm gaze swept across the table. "I'm not here to protect images or ease fears," he said evenly. "I'm here to make sure the businesses we control, my businesses, stand for more than numbers and exclusivity. People are watching. If we don't lead by example, we'll lose everything anyway." Another figure leaned forward, her tone cold. "You think one restaurant makes a difference? It's showing kindness to people. No one cares about changes anything?" Mr. Johnson's voice didn't rise, but the steel beneath it sharpened. "Yes," he said simply. "One restaurant changes a neighborhood changes a city, and a city can change the way the world does business." but only if. We lead, not hide. The room was silent. The figures exchanged glances, some uneasy, others thoughtful. Finally, the first speaker exhaled slowly. You've always done things your way, Johnson. Somehow. It always works. But understand this: if your choices bring trouble to the rest of us. Mr. Johnson's steady gaze cut through the warning. They won't, he said firmly. Because I don't make choices to make headlines. I make choices to make things. Last, the silence stretched again. Then, slowly, the figures began to nod, some reluctantly, others with quiet respect. The meeting wasn't a vote. It wasn't even a debate. It was simply a reminder that the calm, quiet man with the cane didn't just own a restaurant. He held a seat at this table, the one where real decisions were made. Later that night, as the black car carried him back to La Royale, the city lights reflected in the glass. Through the window, Mr. Johnson could see his restaurant glowing softly in the distance, alive with movement and laughter. He adjusted his hat, his voice quiet but certain, as he murmured to himself, "Respect first. Always, no matter how high." The table. When he stepped back into the dining hall, everything was as it should be. The guests were smiling, the staff was focused, and David, standing near the entrance, straightened as Mr. Johnson passed by. "Everything's running smoothly, sir," David said quietly. Mr. Johnson gave a faint nod, his calm eyes scanning the room one last time. "Good," he said softly, "because this is only the beginning." The jazz swelled gently, glasses clinked, and the night at La Royale went on as if nothing had happened. But for those who truly understood, one truth echoed quietly beneath it all. Mr. Johnson wasn't just the owner of a luxury restaurant. He was something far greater. And those who had mocked him once would never underestimate him again.